if you're coming to an international school, it's not cheap. And there's a lot of hidden costs, like, for instance, your visas, your school uniforms, transportation. I'm going to say that again. Transportation is actually probably the biggest shock I got when I arrived.
Well, hello and welcome to Phuket Insights. Today we're talking about education. Well, hello, thank you for coming to the studio. Can you briefly tell me who you are and what is it you do?
Oh, well, Martin, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a wonderful opportunity to come and chat with you. My name is Jacqui, and Jacqui Kuter. I'm currently the Business Relationship Manager at Finnway International School. I came 8 years ago to help build up the school, and I was the inaugural principal of the kindergarten at that stage. It was called Rainbow Trout, the Harbour School. Obviously, because we're in a marina, it was a very appropriate name for a kindergarten. And since then, we've built the school up from 6 students in 2018 to our current around nearly 200 students.
Wow.
And along the way, we've rebranded, we've built a second campus, and yes, we're following the Finnish curriculum, which is very, very exciting. So it's something different, it's something new, and I think it's offering the island something different, you know.
So when did you move to Phuket and where did you come from?
So I'm originally from South Africa, and I'm from a teaching background, so I taught for 12 years. I've always been a bit of an adventurous soul. I've always looked for something new and something that's not the norm. And when I came across the owners, and they told me that they were opening this school in Phuket. That's really the reason I came, was because they were talking about the first Finnish curriculum in Thailand, and my ears pricked up because in my past I worked for a Finnish company as a mechanical draftsperson in the paper and pulp industry. So I had this experience with actually working with Finnish people, and I just loved their work ethic, their innovation. So when I heard about a Finnish school opening, I was, okay, well, I'm going to resign, and I hopped on a plane 8 years ago and came to start the school with the owners who are Thai.
Excellent.
Yeah. One of those things that you do, and I think a lot of people in Phuket do this kind of thing. So I think this is where I feel I connect with a lot of people.
Well, getting into the sort of educational side of things, in your opinion, what's the biggest misconception or mistake that people make when they're coming to Phuket or Thailand, but predominantly Phuket, when they're looking, or their expectations to do with education for their children?
Okay, that's a good question. Because I think people don't really realize what they're coming to. So first of all, you know, if you're coming from a Western country, schools are set up and, you know, you're not necessarily paying for the education, whereas here, if you're coming to an international school, it's not cheap. And there's a lot of hidden costs, like, for instance, your visas, your school uniforms, transportation. I'm going to say that again. Transportation is actually probably the biggest shock I got when I arrived, because you either have to have a motorbike, which is, in my opinion, very dangerous.
Yes.
And I see a lot of people getting motorbikes because that's the only way they can get around. And I've seen some scary things happen. So yeah, that was for me, especially in Phuket. The transport is expensive. Getting around is not cheap. So that was my first wake-up call, to be honest.
In your area of expertise, what mistakes do parents most often make?
Well, I would think that they don't research the schools well enough first as to where the location is.
Yes.
So a lot of people will look at a school and say, oh, that's a great school, but then they want to live at the beach and they suddenly realize they've got a huge commute every day. So that for me is a very important bit of research they should do
Yeah.
before they come.
It's true. I mean, I've been here a little while, and I realised that anything around Blue Tree in the morning is a complete nightmare because everyone's trying to get to the school there, and the traffic jams go. You can easily be held up for 45 minutes in the morning.
That's right.
So it depends which way you're coming from and stuff like that.
That's right. That's actually been a big factor with our school. Obviously, 2 or 3 years ago, there was less traffic and people were happy to live in Bang Tao and travel to Koh Keo. But now they're going, okay, their school's closer, so we're going to move, and they've relocated.
Any other issues?
Looking at curriculum, there's a lot of schools that follow the British curriculum. There's a lot of schools that are doing IB now. And then obviously we have got the Finnish curriculum. So they've got choice. I think what they need to do is definitely visit the school, see how their children feel at the school before they make a decision, because it's a big decision.
So other than actually physically being here, is there any way to research this stuff that you know of?
Well, some of the schools have very nice 3D visual sort of walkthroughs, which is really helpful. But that doesn't give you the feeling of the school.
I was thinking like parents' WhatsApp groups and stuff like that.
Oh, yes, definitely. If you look at the Phuket expat Facebook pages, there's definitely, if you can get into a WhatsApp group. But generally, the Phuket Facebook pages for expats is quite helpful.
Yes.
You get parents, if you just put a question in there, you'll get various answers and then you can follow up with that. So I would say that's a good answer.
So in summary, basically do your research.
Absolutely, do your research before you start.
Excellent. What do you think that families underestimate about raising young children here on the longer term?
Well, of course, the climate. We're in a tropical area. There's dry and hot and there's wet and hot. There's no in between.
Yeah.
You are constantly having to rehydrate. That's a very, very big, important thing for kids. We at school ensure that they bring a water bottle to school every day and they fill it up 3 or 4 times a day, and the parents should be aware of that. So make sure you understand that. Also, it's jungle. Even though it's built up, we are in an area where, and yes, we've had times at school where we've come across snakes in the garden, hornets. The kids have been out playing in the garden and stung by a hornet. So those are the kind of health and safety things that you don't see anywhere else. But here, we're on an island. There, you can't stop the hornets and the snakes from being here. It's not that you see them every day, but they're certainly around. So just be aware of that. Mosquitoes. They have outbreaks of dengue fever. We don't have a lot on the island, but there have been some. So you have to make sure you cover your kids with mosquito repellent every day, 2 or 3 times a day. That's something we ensure at our school.
Yes.
Obviously, sunscreen. You can't just go out. It doesn't feel as hot because it's humid, but the sun is super hot. So make sure you have sun cream on every day. Wearing hats. It's important to make sure that they've got a hat. And then also shoes. You can't really wear trainers because it's hot and it's wet, so they get hot and wet. And the pavements are uneven. We have all sorts of hazards that they can come across. So sensible shoes is very important. What else can I think of? From a health and safety perspective, eating out on the street, food. Know where you're going. Don't just go to anyone, and make sure that you are careful about what you eat. Your first couple of months here, you're bound to have some kind of stomach issue. So make sure you come prepared with medication. Know where you could get medication for that kind of thing. And that's generally most of the things that I've come across.
Yeah. I mean, my experience with the local food is generally been not a problem. And if I ever have any issues, it's been at the more established, more Western cafes where I've had problems. But it's true that just a change of scenery or just a change of climate and background, you always do end up with a few tummy problems.
That's right. And water, for instance, sometimes, we have to get bottled water. I've now got this system where I get the big drums in my home. So that's another thing. You can't just drink out of the tap.
No.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So, what sort of problems and frustrations are you aware of that parents might face?
Yes, well, in the first 3 months, for sure, 3 to 6 months, there's, you're arriving, you're not sure where you are. The schools are, if you haven't done your research, which I hope this will encourage you to do, your first sort of 3 to 6 months is involved. There's a lot of paperwork involved in each school. So there's also, you always have an admissions fee and, your deposits. You need to know the school's policies and you need to follow them regularly because they can change overnight, and that's kind of a culture here. It's not sent out in a bulletin that the policy might have changed or something like that. So make sure that you follow the school's policies and procedures. When it comes to visas, that's its own story, I think. You just need to do your research, make sure that you've got maybe an agent in the beginning to get you started. It does help. It's a bit pricey, but personally, I would go that route to start off with because it's that they are going to be able to help you through all those frustrations. Trying to do it on your own can be quite frustrating, to be honest. Yeah.
So, are there problems getting into certain schools? Is there like waiting lists or?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
There's some of the biggest schools have got waiting lists.
Okay.
And usually those are the ones parents want to get into. But that's why I say do your research, because there are other schools on the island that can give you the same, if not slightly, not better, but a different experience, which is a nice change. So there's definitely waiting lists. And what else can I think of in that side of things?
Let's just say I've got two children. I want maybe say 6 and 8, and I'm looking to put them in a school. What am I looking at it financially, on average? Or what deposit do I have to pay? Is it a tortuous system or is it easy?
It's easy. One thing to be aware of here in Thailand, most schools, or if you want to try and pay with credit card, there's quite high fees involved.
Okay.
So if you're doing bank transfers, there's high fees involved. You can't get a bank account until you've got your visa sorted out. So that can be quite pricey and unexpected because you don't have a bank account yet in Thailand. So you're paying either transfer fees or credit card fees. So be aware of that for sure. So try and figure out there's other types of, there's Wise, and
Yes.
PayPal's a bit expensive, but Wise is quite a good one.
But that's the paying process. But what's the average cost for? I want to enroll my child at a school, and I know they vary, but in general, I'm looking at what sort of figure. You have to pay a deposit, do you say, or is it?
You have a deposit which
Okay.
is held. Some schools have a small deposit. Some schools have what they call a bond. So you need to do your research
So this
on all of
deposit,
those
do you
things.
get it back at the end, or is it a one-time payment?
So you pay a deposit and you pay an entrance fee.
Yeah. Okay. There's two things: a deposit and an entrance fee.
Yes, the entrance fee is non-refundable. The deposit is refundable, but usually with terms and conditions.
Yeah.
So make sure you read your terms and conditions of that.
And are we talking a couple £100 or dollars or thousands of dollars or what?
So unfortunately, my currency conversion is not very good. I'm going to talk in Thai baht.
Yeah, that's fine.
If that's okay. So the bigger schools, you're looking at almost 1 million baht, just your first, to put the bond in and the deposits. You really are. It's a
That's
huge amount,
per child.
significant
That's
amount.
significant.
And then
amount.
obviously, as
And how much of that is the deposit?
depends. They're
Okay.
so different. They've all got a very
But would it
different
be a
thing.
reasonable thing to assume that I'm going to have to find $1 million baht per child to get them into a big school
Into
here?
a big school here? Yes, definitely.
And then the fees are on top of that.
Well, I would say that would be your first year's fees, deposits.
Okay, so
etc.
that would be for the first year's cost.
Yes.
And then
After
ongoing.
that, you're looking at quite substantial, around 500,000 to 800,000 baht per year
Per child.
per child.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
And they do, obviously, they do give sibling discounts. So if you have 3 kids, you get a 15%, etc., etc. But yeah, it's not cheap.
Now, I'm not an expert, but does this sort of compare favorably with other areas, say Singapore or other areas of the world? Is it basically, because I think the misconception of people think is just Thailand is cheap, but the expat and the lifestyle is not. In my experience, it costs pretty much exactly the same here as it does in Singapore or in Europe or all the rest of it. So is that a fair assumption that if you're putting a child in a private education in, say, the UK, the costs here will be comparable? Would you say that's
I think so. I think maybe a little bit less.
okay?
A little bit less. I know that from Hong Kong, Phuket is still, Thailand is still cheaper. Singapore, I think we're still cheaper. So yes, I think we still have a reputation for being cheaper than some of the other bigger.
But it's not like half price. You
No.
know, it's a little bit less expensive.
Yeah, especially
Okay.
if you're wanting to go into the big schools that have been established for, like the BIS, UWCs, those kind of schools,
Yeah.
much more established. But we've got about 20 schools that have opened in Phuket over the last 2 to 3 years, and each school is offering a very good, reasonable education, in my opinion.
Yes, I think my experience is from asking around is that the schooling here is generally good, and also the popular schools are going to cost, but some of the schools which are vying for business, the deposits and the other fees sometimes can be reduced or even less, because if you time it right and do your research, you may be less expensive. So would it be fair to say that, do your research, find the schools you like, but also, contact the schools and sort of say, this is my situation, what is currently
Available for us.
available. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's good advice.
Yeah.
Because you might look online and think, whoa, and then walk away. But actually, if you contacted them, the school might have been amenable to be flexible.
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's
Yes,
interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, so if a family was planning on moving here in the next 6-12 months, what practical advice would you give them before they, set off?
First of all, get yourself, find out where you want to stay. If you're not able to visit Phuket before, then my suggestion would be take a short-term lease somewhere, a couple of months, find your way, come and settle in, and come and see the schools before you make your decision.
Yeah, in other words, take your time.
Yep.
Don't
Yep.
just jump in feet
Yep.
first.
I think that if you were wanting to come in, I would say come in round about this time of the year.
In the low season.
In the low season, during July, August, a lot of schools are holding summer camps. And that's always a good way. If you enroll them in the summer camp of a school, even if it's a week at one school, a week at another school, it's giving you the option to sort of almost test the school and see where it is in comparison to where you want to live.
That's good advice. I mean, because I hear you about don't just come here and sign a 2-year lease on a property. Do get a short-term arrangement so you can find the area you want to be before you sign the year's lease. Because once you're into a lease, you're stuck there for the full 12 months and you can't get out of it.
Yeah, and you definitely won't get your deposit back.
Yeah, absolutely. But also you can't really take that approach with schools. You can't put them in for a few weeks and go, I don't like this, put them somewhere else.
That's right.
Because of the commitment, the financial commitment. So you need to be fairly certain before you start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that if that was one thing I think is a great way to do it, is come end of June and check out the summer camps on the island, because every single school is basically holding a summer camp.
Yeah, because in my opinion, you really could move here with a family without actually being here and making certain this is the environment you want to be. I wouldn't suggest anybody should just look at some TikTok videos and then move their family to Phuket thinking it's going to be smooth. I don't think that would work very well at all.
No, not at all.
Can you think of any sort of common myths or misconceptions that people have had when they've arrived here regarding schooling?
Yes, well, I can think of one particular case where the parent came in, and we obviously, I'm talking Finnway in particular, we follow the Finnish curriculum, but for sure we're not a Finnish school. You can't take a Finland school and put it in Phuket. We have to localize it. And I think the perception from them was that they were going to be in a school that was a mirror image of another Finnish school. And I think if a parent's coming from England, for instance, and they're coming to a British school, they're going to think it's a mirror image of the British school. And it's totally not. It's localized because we're in Thailand. First of all, they have to do Thai. They have to learn Thai, even in the international schools. It's conversational, but you're living in Thailand. This is an expectation of the government, and every school has to have at least 2 lessons of Thai as part of the curriculum. And I think a lot of parents come in and go, oh, we don't want to necessarily learn Thai, but that is something they have to be aware of, and they have to accept. It's a law in Thailand for that. So that's one misconception. And then, and I think to me that's the biggest misconception, to be honest. Yeah.
So from your perspective, what changes have you seen over the last few years?
So we've seen a very much bigger group of people coming in from different countries. So, for instance, Russia, Ukraine, China, not as much. That's where I've seen a big change. Chinese have been less prominent. But we've got 27 different nationalities in our school, and we're only 200 students. So what people don't realize is that when you put all these different cultures together, you have totally different expectations. So you've got, for instance, you've got Australians that are a little bit more relaxed, but actually want to see results in their kids. I'm just trying to think, there's so many different cultures, and every single one has a different idea of what education should be. So for parents, teachers, for the kids themselves, it's really challenging to see how different people behave. So for instance, the Thai children are still very respectful, quiet, whereas some of the European and Western kids come in and they're quite boisterous and loud, and they want to be heard straight away. So it's a very big challenge for everybody, including the parents.
And what changes have you seen? Has this become more of an issue or less of an issue?
I think it's become more of an issue, but in that there's so many different cultures. But at the same time, I'm seeing the children grow incredibly. Because if you've got the right teachers in the classroom where you're teaching each other about various different cultures, I think this generation is going to become amazing. Some of them they're speaking 3 or 4 different languages already.
But the education sector is expanding. There's more and more schools here, you're saying?
Yes.
And that is reflecting the fact that there's more and more people coming to the island. Is that correct?
Well, this is what it seems like, because first of all, we're having more schools. There's a lot of development going on.
Yeah.
But to be honest, in reality, I don't actually see.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Where all those people are.
I'm kind of aligned with you.
Fill it up,
Yeah, I think that I don't know for sure, but I got the feeling that certain areas and certain sectors, and schooling might be one of them, where there may be an oversupply. I'd be interested to see what happens there. I'd be interested in your opinion on that as well.
Yes.
Because obviously if there's an oversupply, then prices may come down or be more competitive, or some may fail. And so that might be interesting. And I wouldn't want my child to be in a school that's struggling. So again, research will be really, really key.
Very, very important, because in the landscape at the moment in Phuket, it is changing. There's a lot of development. There's a lot of new schools opening. So we've seen it in our school where parents have withdrawn because they're wanting to try a new school, or they're wanting to move closer to their homes because of the traffic. So all these pop-up schools are now competing with each other. And that's what I would like. I can't see the future, but that's probably for me one of the biggest areas to be watching. Make sure that you do your research and that the school you choose is the established schools, not necessarily the new ones.
Yes.
They may be, they may have great reputations in their franchise, but whether they are going to be successful in Phuket is another question.
Yeah, that's
So for
interesting.
sure, do your research. I think one of the biggest concerns, or one of the biggest things parents should think about, is when they're going to the school, don't look at the school because it's got the biggest reputation or the best reputation. Let your child see what their class is like, what is the ratio of English to what they speak, and especially thinking about their moving countries. For them, it's not about moving to a new place and exciting. For them, they're leaving their friends behind, they're leaving everything they know behind. So when you choose a school for them, make sure that they feel comfortable, that they feel a sense of belonging in whichever class it is that they go into. So choose wisely for your child. Really.
So you'd be able to find this out if I took a tour of a school. Do you think?
Absolutely, yes. And that's the question you should ask, because every class is different. So you might be in a school that's got a lot of English-speaking students, but your particular class that your child is going into happens to have more Thai, Russian than yours, and that's where they then feel out, or that they're not belonging.
All right.
And you might then choose another school, even though it's different.
So make sure the tour is actually a tour of the parts of the school and the classes that your child's going to be in, rather than just a general look around.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good advice.
Yeah.
So in your experience, what type of families just fit in and work? And conversely, which are the sort of types of people that don't quite gel?
For sure, I think families that have got a history of travel,
Yeah.
they've been to other countries, they've done this before, they're usually easy to fit in. They understand culture, that every country has its culture. I think the flexibility and respect are the two biggest
Yeah.
things that I would say is necessary for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. I think we're covered.
that answer
Yeah, no, that's great. Because one thing I try to get, it's come up, I haven't really pushed it, but in every interview, the word that comes up every time is respect.
Respect.
What works in Thailand is respect. The whole culture works on respect. You want to deal with a policeman, you want to deal with a teacher, you want to deal with the man in the shop. It's about respect. If you start being, how can I put it? Yeah, I think
don't know
that
if you can put
you
that.
raise an interesting point, and it comes up often in these interviews. Understanding the Thai culture, and you are in Thailand after all, and it's based on respect, will get you much further. Banging a desk at the post office back in the UK or Australia or whatever, because something's gone wrong, might get you somewhere, because you can berate the other person. But here, it'll be completely counterproductive.
Opposite.
So you have to be polite, patient, and
not overly gushy either, because
no, just respectful.
Just
Gets you a
respectful.
long way. I think that's good advice. And that goes in Phuket and Thailand for everything, whether it's dealing with the policeman or dealing with the school teacher or the local
7-Eleven,
Yeah.
Just everywhere. And I really have to say that from the minute I arrived, the first 3 to 4 months, I was very much in my South African, everything needs to get done, and I'm a doer, and I want to get things done, I want to make it happen, to eventually realizing, no, just breathe, respect.
Out of interest,
and move.
does this get incorporated into the education system for the children here, or just?
Very much so. Yeah. So that's what, especially I think in our school, this is something that we start with from pre-K, 2-year-olds. You'll see them walking across. I know you've seen them coming and going, but the Thai children are always, parents are always encouraging them to why, but we've got all of the kids behaving in the same way, understanding each other, helping each other, learning the language of each other. So already our youngest are talking 3 or 4 languages because they want to communicate with their friends. So that is a very big value for us, is respect.
Now, despite all these challenges, what do you think? Why do people come here? Why do families come to Phuket?
And why do they stay?
Yes.
I think this is a question that every person that is here, every foreign person, probably asks themselves regularly. And I think for me, it is because of the respect and because of the beautiful culture that I experience here. I feel safe. I feel like I'm not on a treadmill or, in the rush of life, that you can come home, go to the beach, have a relax. You're not rushing in a train somewhere. Yes, the traffic can be a bit irritating, but even then, it's not like you on a freeway or you on a train somewhere, you just kind of sabai, And I think that's what keeps us here. It's just the climate is great as well. So I guess that's my answer to that. And to add to that, Phuket is such a vibey place, to be honest. You can go to the mall, so you've got a lovely mall, but on the other hand, you also feel like you're in the jungle, and you are able to meet people from all walks of life on a daily basis. And that's really what keeps me going, is that I get to meet amazing people, new people every day, whereas if I was back home, it's the same people, which is great if you're that certain person.
In the schools here, do they is there a first language? Is it English or?
So yes, in the international schools, it's English. We've got another school that is French and English, bilingual. And then we've got a couple of schools that are Thai, Chinese, bilingual, but the international schools are generally English.
Okay.
Yes, you have to have some level of English. It's a good question, actually. So if you're coming from Portugal or any other country, if your child isn't able to communicate in English, it can be quite a big issue. And I think that's something that parents need to realize. Their child will generally go into what we have is an intensive English program, which is where they learn English basically half the day, and then they get to join like PE or music or art to then practice their English.
But it's kind of unavoidable for the majority of the international schools. English is the first language.
Absolutely. And in a lot of schools, some of the bigger schools, they write an entrance exam.
Okay.
So they won't get into those.
We didn't mention that with the entry requirements. So obviously there's the financial side.
Yes.
But is there an aptitude side as well?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes. Definitely.
You don't just pay your money and your child goes through the front door.
No. Especially with, as I say, the bigger schools, because they have a waiting list in some cases, so they have a proper entrance test for the child.
Okay.
They have to do English, and I think they have to do maths, and so for us, we've accepted kids that have not been accepted at other schools. And that's sort of been one of our niche areas because we've offered this intensive English program.
So the schools have an entrance examination, right? And that'll be in English, I take it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
And so if your child doesn't speak English, they are a bit stuck.
Yeah, so it can happen, but especially the bigger schools, because they generally have a waiting list, so they all have entrance exams. And so if your child is not fluent in English or is quite low in English, there is a possibility that they won't be accepted initially into the bigger schools. You might want to go there later, which you can do. But for the smaller schools, they're generally more flexible. And because the classes are maybe a bit smaller, it's quite easy for the kids to come in. And well, not easy, but because they won't be accepted into our mainstream program, we have an intensive English program, which is where they start. And that helps them to quite quickly move up into mainstream.
Okay. Now, beyond tuition fees and obviously the initial costs and stuff, is there any other hidden costs or unexpected costs associated with kids at school?
Yes, absolutely. Because, obviously some of the schools offer, as part of the fee, they offer certain after-school activities. But in every school, there are activities that are offered by outside providers, and that becomes an additional cost. So if your child wants to go, for instance, they've got, for us it is gymnastics, for instance. We don't have gymnastics as part of our school, so we go to a gymnastics school, they have to pay additional for that. In our school, all of our after-school activities, except our football team, are extra costs. And as I say, even in some of the bigger schools, there's definitely extra paid activities. And excursions are covered to a point, but we also have overseas trips, which are then, peer pressure, so-and-so is going, we want to go. So yeah, there's definitely, you need to look out for that. There's uniforms you have to buy. What else is there?
Are all the learning materials provided by the school?
Yes.
All of them?
All of the learning materials are.
But I wouldn't be expected to go down to the local Apple shop and come back with a MacBook Pro 16 Super Duper M5.
Well, not you. We have a set of them that they get shared between the kids in the technology class. Probably in secondary, they are going to need to have an iPad or a tablet of sorts, which is not provided by the school.
Okay. But I think that's pretty common anyway.
I think that's everywhere now, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
They probably all have one anyway.
So what sort of help or cover do the schools offer in terms of like healthcare or anything like that?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, we do have insurance for every single child. And our insurance covers them for an accident. So for us, it's around 10,000 baht per accident. So
not an awful lot, but
not
something.
a lot, but it helps with the minor accidents. But for sure, you should have your own medical health care, because the hospitals are great, very good. If you want to go to the public ones, like Bangkok Hospital, it's expensive. And as soon as they see that it's a foreigner walking in, the price goes up double. The local, or what do they call them? Not the private hospitals, the local hospitals, like for instance Mission Hospital. You can go there, but there's always a queue. There's a long queue, so the prices are better. But generally, you'd have to wait. You might have to wait. But so for sure, have medical care, medical health care.
For the whole family.
For the whole family, yes, definitely.
It's interesting that the schools actually do have some basic cover,
Yes.
but it wouldn't cover, let's say, a broken wrist or anything like that.
No, not fully. So it will cover partially for something that's broken, but definitely not the full amount. It's more for minor accidents that they have. Yeah.
Yeah, but anybody coming here must have comprehensive medical cover, that's for sure.
Absolutely, because as we were saying, you've got the dengue fever that there's possibility of. Because we're a small island, especially we find with kids, they get the respiratory, it's very contagious. The tummy bugs are very contagious. And then they get dehydrated quickly, so they'll spend a night or two in hospital. So for sure, make sure that you're covered.
Yeah. Are there any sort of medical conditions that pop up here more frequently than people might expect? I'm thinking of with my own particular boy, there's been
hand, foot, and mouth. Yes, definitely. That's definitely a sort of, there's a certain season. All the schools have it, and sometimes they'll close for a day or two to do a deep clean. So we've got that. We've got the dengue fever. There's also been, as I say, a lot of the respiratory coughing and runny noses and fevers.
Yeah, children,
that kind
in
of
other words.
thing. Yeah. I try and say, I do think that as a child, it's better to get these kind of things so that you can build up your immune system, but it does end up costing. So that's why I make sure you've got some kind of medical
Yeah,
aid.
with my little boy, because he was born in Singapore, he's been vaccinated for everything. And that includes all the more regional issues, which you
Okay.
probably wouldn't have back in Europe, because I am certainly not an anti-vaxxer. But again, if you were coming here, I guess that's something that people would have to do the research on.
Definitely make sure that if you're coming here, you've checked out what vaccinations you should have.
What haven't I asked you? What question would you like me to ask you, or is there something that you would like to say that to anybody that's thinking of coming here, especially with children, that they need to know about?
So I'm going to talk from experience, especially for our teachers coming from Europe, from any other country. It's not the same as teaching in international schools around the world. It's Thailand. Again, this big respect thing is important, because teachers tend to come in, especially international school teachers, come in with sort of this, oh, I'm some kind of special person that needs to be looked after and treated, as royalty because I speak English. And those are the people that find it the hardest to accept the way of life here, how they get around. There's no public transport in Phuket. You have to understand that you're going to have transport costs, and that you need to be respectful. You need to be soft. Don't speak loudly, and because even if you speak loudly, it feels like you're shouting at them. So try and practice your softness if you can, and it'll get you a long, long way.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed that. And if you found that useful, please do like and subscribe to the channel. It will help us grow. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for asking me.